This is one of the hardest stories I've ever told. Just the other day I was 10 kilometers from the ISIS front line in northern Iraq, one of the toughest places on earth to be a Christian. I've sat in makeshift camps with people that the world has come to know as IDPs, internally displaced people. People unable to flee their country and are therefore rendered as refugees within their own country. I sat with a woman who pleaded with me to save her. Save me, she cried as she beat her body and sort of pulled her clothes. What terrified me was that she said those words with the exact same desperation as someone who were drowning. I felt powerless, and I realized in that moment I was essentially watching this woman drown in front of my very eyes. This is probably the most helpless, the most hopeless I have ever felt. As families retell their stories, I see the visible stress and anxiety, but their desire that the West would know and would help, it almost forces the words from their mouth. I see pain, I see trauma, and I see suffering. But I also see strength, endurance, courage. Amongst the devastation, I've met people with a vision that is nothing short of incredible. People who tell me that the reason they choose to stay is because they believe that in this country, one day every knee will bow and every tongue confess that Jesus is Lord. These people, they're teachers, doctors, builders, police officers and pastors, refugees within their own country but choosing to be leaders within these displaced communities. One of the bishops we're working with here lived in a monastery, and when he heard ISIS were coming through, he and his church fled. But after a few days, the prospect of life in an IDP camp seemed worse than returning. And so he and a few members of his church returned. When they returned, the members looked at him and said, "Bishop, what will happen to us when ISIS come?" And he looked at them and he said, "Well, they will shoot you on the spot. But me, they'd burn me alive. And I'm happy to die for Jesus." This is not an isolated story, it's one story. But I've been in camps with 5,000 people. That's 5,000 stories. I met a young boy whose father's captured by ISIS. His whereabouts are currently unknown, and now this child, he lives in what I call IDP Tower. It's an unfinished 7-story hotel which now houses 160 families. Or a woman who told me that there is no hope for her daughter's future. They now live in a 5-metre by 2-metre caravan in an IDP camp, which can at times house up to 10 people. Or another couple captured by ISIS for 10 days. Yeah, they were released, but they carry a lifetime's worth of trauma. And now they find themselves living in one of the most remote IDP camps I've ever been to. Temperatures during the day get to 50 degrees Celsius and in winter -5 at night. You see, behind every statistic, behind every number is a story, a person. I can't help but be moved by something a pastor said to me, a pastor who now has an IDP community living inside his church. And he said the following: "They destroyed our churches. We now worship in one church. They destroyed our homes. We have built one home together. We are free. They are not. They may have taken our land, but they will never take our Jesus."